Before we get started, and I turn this over, I want to welcome you to our first online First Friday Toolkit with Mike Owens and Alicia Allen to talk about animation. Before we get started, though, we just have to acknowledge the fact that we are participating yet again in an industry panel composed entirely of white people. In doing so, we are acknowledging a failure on the part of this organization and the industry at large, I think, to promote and support people of color and Black voices. I know that acknowledgement is not action, and statements of support and solidarity on your website or social media are all well and good. But our organization, Minnesota Film and TV, needs to explore ways to make systemic, lasting change, both within our organization and in Minnesota's production industry at large. We are all responsible for taking action, for engaging in self-reflection, and for having really difficult conversations. We are having those conversations internally at Minnesota Film and TV, and I hope that everyone here will join us in being part of that dialogue. I welcome your thoughts, your ideas, your opinions. So please, I think everyone knows how to get in touch with me. Send those on. And now I want to bring Mike and Alicia into this and basically turn this over to them. Do you have any opening thoughts, guys?
Alicia?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with everything that you said, Melody, in terms of not just putting diversity on a website, but really showing it through action, and also acknowledging the moments that we've not done our part. As members of the Nice Moves board, I promise, and Mike promises, and the board promises, that we will do better, and we should have done better from the start. And I'm just really sorry. And I hope that seeing other people acknowledging other groups, but also individuals acknowledging that their own efforts have fallen short and that they haven't done their own part, that will open the door for other people to also acknowledge their own shortcomings, and that maybe together that we can move past this feeling of guilt and move into a feeling of action, and not just consider what we're going to be doing in these moments, but what we're going to be doing for the next 50 years, how we can practice doing two things at once, how we can practice living our daily lives and ending systematic racism. Yeah, that's...
Yeah, the one thing I want to address for myself personally is this event is advertised through Minnesota's personal connection to the film Hair Love, which I was hired to be a small part of. So I don't, if it comes across as tone deaf at all of putting that out there, but what that led me to is Karen Rupert Tolliver from Sony, who is a producer on Hair Love, put out a statement about all of our responsibility and how it particularly pertains to storytellers and filmmakers. So we'll have that link for you because it says more than I ever could. And I think we're all just committed to how do we move forward. I mean, this presentation was originally like, we're going to talk about how animation works in Minnesota and sort of just be really like a practical, pragmatic, which it still will be, honestly, because like Alicia is saying, we have to do two things at once. We can't forget about our people need to work, people need to learn, people need to, and we need to carry that into what we do next. So I think that pragmatic with being committed to what change needs to happen.
Great, thank you both. So I am just going to take myself out of this and turn it over to you all, and I'll see you back on the other side for Q&A.
Sounds good.
I'm going to share my screen now. Oops. All right. So, what in the gosh darn heck is a nice moves? Well, I'm glad you asked, because we made a video explaining just that. Hey friends, welcome to Nice Moves. Nice Moves was established in order to strengthen the animation, design, and visual effects community right here in Minnesota, as well as the surrounding areas. Our first step involved creating a tighter connection within the community through studio tours and networking events. Our next step was to identify and cultivate local talent through our Nice Moves mentorship program. We've taken the time to meet each other, and now we're making the time to help each other. Let's get excited and get together and make some connections and learn. Nice Moves! Yay. Right. So that's what Nice Moves is and what Nice Moves does. We host events, we host workshops, we host mentorship programs. We try to offer, we have like pillars that we think about, and that includes community, making sure that we're all talking and exchanging ideas with each other. It includes inspiration, like finding new things to motivate us to create more on our own. It includes promotion, because Minnesota Humble is not going to be creating a lot of sales, so we help aid and promote other artists around Minnesota and the surrounding states. And then it also includes education, which is probably the biggest pillar. And yeah. So what is the difference between animation, motion graphics, and visual effects? Well, it's really complicated because they're actually very, very similar. Like if you take all three of those, they all actually fall under the ginormous umbrella of animation. But you know, I get that that's not a very good response, right? They're the same, but they're different. So a good way to think about it is not really like what they are specifically, but who they serve specifically. What is the purpose of the thing that the animation, because they're all just different forms of animation, what are they going to be used for? So like in the case of animation, a lot of times that's like, if you think about film and television, whereas motion graphics is also animation, but a lot of times that's more geared towards like title design when you're talking about film and television, or HUD UI graphics when you're talking about film and television. But it also covers the commercial world and the corporate world. So we're talking corporate videos, explainer videos, commercials, things like that. And then visual effects is both completely visible and completely invisible. So some things you might not even think of when you think of visual effects, but they're in our everyday commercials, they're in our film, they're in our television. So when we're trying to think about these different things and like what they each are, sometimes it's better to just really focus on what it is you need when you're looking to hire someone. So we've got nuggets of information to help guide you through your search if you're looking to create a video, especially now because it's so hard to shoot live action. What are some helpful tips that can guide you through your process of creation if you want to include animation or motion graphics or visual effects? Mike, do you want to take it over?
I remember.
Oh, sorry. I'm just going to go to the next frame.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I just having the conversation of what animation is and being able to work together, because there's often sort of a split and a mystery and a magic about animation. So echoing what Alicia's saying about what you're asking for, knowing what you want when who do you look for, what kind of animator do you need? But some of the myths that we've all come across in this business a lot, to some of you, you've heard this before, some of you, this may be new, but if you're approaching an animator or a crew, the idea that it's cheaper than live action, like that's the reason to do it. Not necessarily. I mean, it could be on average $10,000 a minute, depending, there's so many factors in animation. It can be cheaper and efficient, but the myth that like, that's its benefit, that's its only benefit, is it's a cheaper way to tell a story. It's another way to tell a story. That animation is for kids, and that's it. Totally true. All of us in animation, of course, we're kids watching animation. But the power of animation as a storytelling medium, not a genre. Animation is not a genre. It's a medium, right? And those lines are blurring more and more as people have access to technology and personal storytelling. All of us have cameras on our phones. We're all media makers right now. The media is not something separate, it is us. But it's not, animation is something that can get a point across in a way that maybe live action can't. So think about, it's not just something to occupy kids while you make dinner. Can be great for that if that works, awesome. But it's so much, it can be so much more, and it has been so much more. And then the other notion that it's all done by computers, there's a certain amount of like, there's an animate button on your keyboard and it gets done for you, and it's, that's it. It's all trickery now. No skill, talent, art is needed anymore. Couldn't be further from the truth. We all use computers. It's a digital workforce, work platform. I still do hand-drawn stuff, but all the things that go into it of storytelling and thought and budget writing and production, idea creation, acting, all the things you have to think about beyond just like pushing that invisible animate button. So I think really realizing how it fits into the whole spectrum of storytelling and how it can be something you maybe didn't even think of before. Yeah. Do you want me to keep rolling, or you want to take this one? You should take
Yeah, I can take it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about animation, especially like if you need animation, like it's if you're coming, so a lot of the people, we assumed a lot of the people coming and listening to this today, they're coming from like more of an editorial background. They're editors or filmmakers. They've primarily been working in live action. So if we're talking to you, and that's you, some things to consider when you're thinking about adding animation into your work is that everything has to be created from scratch. We can't just go to like Target or Walmart and pick up some props. We can't really rent a location. Everything that exists in animation has to be created. There are resources to save time where you can buy or license materials to speed that process up. But that said, it still has to be set dressed. It still has to be rendered. There's still a lot that goes into it to make it something that can be visually seen by other people who don't have the programs to see it. And so because of that, it doesn't really follow a typical live action pipeline. There's a lot of things that need to be thought about in animation that maybe don't necessarily need to be thought of at quite the same scale. So like a lot of times in live action, you do need to think about the set, and you do need to think about how you're going to dress it and how that all ties into the story. But with animation, you have to have everything decided and created before you can even really begin to do the animation part of it. And then also the misconception that animation is a really, really speedy process. It takes a lot longer, and there's a lot of ways that we'll get into on how you can save time. If you're going to be working with an animator or a visual effects artist or a motion graphics artist, which they're all animators. But if you're going to be working with talent like that, things that you can do to save time in the actual animation production. It's still going to take a long time, though. It takes the same amount of time as live action, plus all the time you need to create every single item and character and everything. Yeah. So
I'll jump in.
when, yeah, okay, good. You gonna take it?
I will, if you want me to. Okay.
Yeah.
So the questions to ask yourself, we were trying to pare this down because there's so many deciding factors in animation when you want to figure out how to practically get something done. So if you're going to approach an animator, motion graphics person, visual effects person, be able to answer these questions of what do you want? What do you see? What is your vision for the story that you want to tell? Like, I want to fill the sky with a flock of birds, but shooting that is, out of my capacity. I'm not a bird wrangler. But like, just be open and honest about what is your grand vision. Don't try to cut yourself off because you're already worried about budget. Start there, because that's what we all want to get to. What you need. So, as any sort of creative brief that you do for anything, if you're you're trying to build a crew or start a project or raise some money, just have a very simple, clear proposal of the project. What are the deliverables? What is the scope? What is the duration? What sort of styles are you referencing? Just some pragmatic things that we can discuss factors. If you want to do a giant robots fighting scene, like that sounds great. Now that we can figure out how much that would cost, how much time that would take, the kind of resources, but lay it out for us, because it's as having those specifics allows us to discuss the factors and find how to do to get your vision. And then what you have, the thing that everyone in independent film animation has to worry about is your budget. Be also honest about that. Please try not to ask animators to do it for free. Everyone in this field understands, they've been asked those questions before, whether it's animation or live action. It's your art, it's free, do it. It's like, no, it's also our livelihood. But that being said, like, animation can be crazy expensive, which I'm sure you all know. $10,000 a minute, bare minimum. But I'm a firm believer that something can be created for any budget. It's just a matter of discussing and adjusting your expectations. If you've got $1 million in your pocket, you're going to get $1 million vision out there in the world. But because you only have $10,000 doesn't mean it ends there for you. Now that we have what you want and what you need and what you have, and you're talking with someone who's an expert in their area, you can work together and collaborate. This is the part that's not drawing and animating or pressing the animate button. It's having that discussion of what is expected, needed, and how you're going to get there together. It's, animation, filmmaking, it's all a community effort. It's community production. It's a collaborative thing. So walk into it that way and, do your research and come to the table ready to get your vision done and make some decisions.
Next slide. All right, let's talk money. So money is probably one of the hardest parts of making animation, because animators need money in order to stay alive and feed themselves so that they can animate more. And a lot of people who want to hire or even need to hire animators don't always have the budget for it. That said, there are things that can be done to save money in the long run, but it's what you save in money. Your coupons to save on your budget are actually just your time. Your time is the coupon. So it depends on how much you invest on your end in planning and thinking and storyboarding and blocking everything out. That's where a lot of it can happen. And you can actually, where a lot of your money saving can happen. And you can start to have conversations with animators throughout the process before actual animation starts. So you can kind of get an idea of like what is possible and what budget concerns would be. If you're looking to hire an animator at an hourly rate, right off the bat, we can tell you that that's probably not the best idea. The main reason is because animation takes hours and hours and hours, and it's not something where you can just chip an hour here or chip an hour there. It's something where like it requires, even when you're not sitting at the computer and actually doing the animation, it requires the full focus and thought to create it. And so for that reason, like we recommend that when you're looking to hire animators, get used to the idea of paying a day rate or a weekly rate or a monthly rate. And the reason you're doing that is not just for the animator, but it's for yourself too, so that you know, like you've hired that animator for the day, you can communicate with them all day. If you hire them for the week, like you're going to have like communication with them for the whole week. You get what you pay for. If you paid for an hour, but you want to just jump on a 20-minute call, well, if you didn't pay for that time, then you're not going to get that service. Another thing to consider is like, let's say you have two artists, like let's say you're hiring a freelancer and you've got one artist who's $600 a day and has 5 years experience, and you have another person who's let's say like 250 or 300 a day, let's say 300 a day, and has 2.5 years experience, right? So they have half the experience, but they also are half the rate. It can be tempting to go ahead and just take the person or use the person or work with the person who is working at half the rate. But what you're not considering is that they also have half the experience, which means they may not have enough experience to see red flags before they happen. They might not be able to warn you about roadblocks that might be met as you get further into production. And sometimes you can end up spending a lot more of your own time and your own energy. And this isn't to say that you shouldn't hire people at lower rates, because they're awesome too. And like, you should look at the quality of the work, the time and the effort that you have to invest in the project yourself and in guiding the animation. And those should all be factors that you consider when you're considering budget and price. Budget isn't just about the money that you're spending on a project. It's also about the time that you have to invest. If you have to invest 40 of your own hours and you're worth a certain amount, you have to think about how much you're spending of your own time on that as well, and factor that into the price and the budget of the animation that you're trying to create. The reason I say that is just, if you are looking to get something done where you can just hire someone, give them the brief, have a few conversations, and they handle it, you're going to have to get used to like those higher sticker prices, because those people have the experience to like see the pitfalls before they happen. You're paying a higher price because they have the experience to be able to save you money in the long run. And yeah, sometimes though you know exactly what you want, you really want your fingers deep into the planning, and you're going to be heavily involved in the process. That's where like working with a junior person side by side and working with them together and looking at those and understanding that there probably will be pitfalls, because you have to really consider experience. Just understanding that and working together and collaborating and learning together, that's it all comes down to, you get what you pay for, and you have to like enter into that business relationship with the understanding of like what you're providing and what your expectations are, and do they match? Yeah, and then a person can die from exposure. Legit. People can work and work and work and work, but if they're not getting paid, they can't feed themselves, they can't afford a shelter for themselves, they can't afford the basic like human necessities for survival, then exposure is actually worthless. And this is just something that we have to say every time we talk to any group, which is like, be very, very, very careful about accepting work for exposure, and be very, very, very careful about offering work for exposure. Because yeah, exposure doesn't pay the bills. That isn't to say that you can never like ever do something for exposure. It's just that it's very, very low on the value, like the value return totem pole. Like exposure is super low. Yeah. I hope I did that right.
Yeah, that's I just to tack onto that, the idea of hiring the person that can foresee the red flags and the pitfalls on the line based on experience. Those animation is, hopefully it's coming across, and it's a lot of work and is a collaborative effort. So those experienced people that can see the red flags can hire those lower rate people to help them do it, and then they learn the process along the way. So it's not like we're saying only come to the best, forget those people at all, right? It's because it's collaborative. What you're paying for is experience, like in anything, fixing your car. Who's going to do your roof? Do you someone who's done it before, or someone who just really likes roofs? I'm gonna let you take this one.
Freelancer. Yeah.
Okay.
So, a lot of times, especially if you don't have experience working or utilizing animation, whether it's visual effects or motion graphics or just animation, if you don't have experience utilizing animation in your pipeline, my recommendation would be to just go directly to the studios and let them help you figure out, is this a project that would be better for a freelancer, or is this something that a studio could handle? Because you aren't going to necessarily have the wealth of knowledge to be able to like decide that. That said, there are like studios have teams, and so certain projects are better suited for studios because they require a handful of expertises to come together to create your product, or your final video, whereas freelancers, and that is like, don't get me wrong, that is absolutely true for freelancers too. A lot of freelancers, especially around town, will take on jobs that are not necessarily something they would handle themselves, but they sort of build like a temporary studio out of the best talent, and they'll take on projects like that too. That said, there's only a handful of those freelancers who are equipped to operate in a similar way to a studio, where you hire one person, you have a point person, and that person has a team behind them helping craft your message, or whatever it is you're making. But if you're at the very beginning and you haven't had experience in this world, going to a studio, they'll tell you right away if your project is just not something that is appropriate for a studio. And if they don't offer freelancer options, you can ask. Like the studios around town, they know a lot of the freelancers. They know the really responsible and tested freelancers. They also know a lot of the up and coming freelancers, people maybe that they haven't had the chance to test out themselves yet, but they know that they exist. That's a really great way to get in touch. That's just as like a side note, Nice Moves, we don't plan on building a directory because there are several directories out there, but our our intention is to find a directory that we would point a lot of people to, a directory that already exists, that is where we would encourage people to go if they have already created a profile. Go clean up your profile, make sure your website is up to date, make sure your reel is up to date, and make sure that you have listed what your specialties are, so that someone who isn't super deep into the world of animation can understand, like, well, I'm looking for X and this person does X, so I'm going to reach out to them. If you are a filmmaker who is looking for an animator, the MN Film and TV Board has artists. Another option, like I said, is to reach out to individual studios. Because even if the project is not appropriate for a full-fledged team or a full studio, they are so connected to the industry. They rely on the freelancers as well, that they can help you get connected with a freelancer. In case you're wondering though, like, how do I know how to get in contact with a studio? There's a number of studios, like a lot. This is actually like the website scroll from the Nice Moves directory of studios. We have assigned 3 specialties to each studio. If you're a studio on here and you don't like what your specialties are, just reach out to nicemoves.org. Let's get together at nicemoves.org. And we can hash that out. We can find the like appropriate 3 like classifications for your studio. The reason we chose to narrow it down to 3 is that there are some studios that do like a huge amount of stuff. But if you're looking for someone, or for a studio or a freelancer who's an expert in a very niche area, it's better if they're listed, so you can just find the right people right away. And studios will tell you too, if you reach out to a studio and they're not the appropriate one, they'll usually let you know of a better one or the most appropriate one, which is really cool. So yeah, I would say like go to the nicemoves.org studio directory, take a peek, look at the different work of the different studios around town, and then look at like what their specialties are and think about what you need, and then go ahead and just reach out to those studios. And if they can't help you, they will help you find who you need. And if they don't offer it, just ask. I swear, like, it's Minnesota nice. Well, not the sketchy kind, but the good kind of Minnesota nice. They will share. I hope that answers that.
It's like on Miracle on 34th Street when Gimbals started sending everyone over to Macy's because they had better deals on toys. It's amazing what the animation community, how supportive it can be in and of itself.
Yeah, because we all love animation, and even if we're too busy with other projects to take on more projects, I've just noticed a lot of the studios and a lot of the artists around town are really, really great about recommending each other and knowing each other's strengths and passing that information on to people who are looking for animation. So the next few slides, that sounded super Minnesotan. So the next few slides we're about to go through are to talk about the different studios in town, and also kind of explaining the overlap, because remember at the very beginning we were talking about animation, motion graphics, visual effects. What does it all mean? There's like all these different kinds of niches. The reason we open with that is because it's so important for you to understand like what it is you're looking for and like what those words are so that you can find it. It's hard to Google and search for something if you don't know the words to search for. So the first set we'll go through, and what you'll see is like some of these studios are listed in a few different places. That's because they do a few different things. So like if we look at the different types of animation creators in town, and again, we're focusing on studios because we have a directory for that. In the future, we'll focus on freelancers as well. But there's Afterglow Studios, Crash Ensues, Gasket, Make, Mightier, Neighbor, and Pixel Farm. And if you were to go to each of those studio sites, what you would also see is like sort of a style. Like they're not, if we were to think about this from the perspective of like outfits, right? They're all wearing similar outfits, but they definitely each have their own individual styles, and that's a result of the different individual artists that they have at their studios. So like if you're looking for motion graphics, like let's say you're making a film and you've got the Minority Report kind of HUD display stuff. That's something where you'd want to look at these different studios and the work that they do and like find the one that has that in there. That counts as motion graphics. But let's say maybe you need some like cute characters and a lot of type for a product or service that you're offering. That's where, like, again, you go to these different studio websites and you find who has that kind of stuff in their portfolio, who's been doing it. Let me see some examples. Some of these studios do some of the same stuff. That's really cool. There's a lot of things that we get asked for to do that overlaps. Like a lot of companies need videos that explain their product or service. Most of the motion graphics towns in town have an extensive amount of experience handling explainer videos or doing educational videos or anything that involves informing. You'll notice that a lot of the studios around town have that ability. Oops, I don't know why that one was separate. Our bad. There's also visual effects studios. And so when you think about visual effects, it could be as simple as a sky replacement. Like let's say you shot a bunch of stuff and you had to go back and redo a shoot, and now the sky is like overcast in some of your clips, but it's bright and sunny in another. And you've tried to do what you can for the lighting on your people, but the sky is the wrong sky. Visual effects is both hidden and obvious. So like sky replacements would be like the hidden ones. Or like let's say you have copyrighted material in the background of a scene and you need that to be covered up or removed. That would include visual effects. Or let's say you shot your actor and on day one the cut was over here, but then there was like a slight mistake and now the cut's over here. That would be visual effects to put it where it was. Things like that. Those are all the hidden ones. It's also giant robots duking it out in New York City with tons of explosions. We have studios that can do those things. I definitely recommend like checking out Drive-Thru, Splice, Pixel Farm, Fuse, Suspect 7, Volt, all these amazing creators. If you're looking for these kinds of things. You'll notice too that Pixel Farm was in motion graphics, but they are also under visual effects. That's because they do both. And also we didn't put every single studio that was on the directory because that would be overwhelming. We're just breaking down that there's different niches. We also have like studios that specialize in medical animation, that people who have worked with doctors, they understand the process of working with doctors, and what do they call them? Industrial designers who create the medical stuff. I don't work in medical animation, so please don't get mad at me. But if you need medical animation, there are 3 amazing and wonderful studios in town that can do just that. And it wouldn't make sense to hire a studio that doesn't specialize in that. It makes sense to work with people who have had the experience, who can really guide you through that journey and who can probably save you a lot of money in the long run, because you won't have to really redo as much. You'll be able to like anticipate any challenges. And then we've got independent studios, and independent studios, some of them do work that is both commercial and independent, or commercial isn't the right word. I guess they do work for clients, and then they also do work for themselves. So EG does a lot of really amazing educational animation stuff, but they also make their own stuff: robot animation, Womo, Make, Flora and Fauna, a lot of studios that create animations for the sake of creation and not really necessarily for the sake of profit or for another person, for themselves. Yeah, that's an overview. This is where I think it might be helpful when we're having a conversation. If there was anything that anyone saw through these slides that we really didn't dive deep enough into, it would be helpful for us, because we could try to predict that we need to go deep on every single topic, but that might not be serving what would be valuable to the audience. So, question time, right? Is it question time?
Yeah. Alicia, if you want to take your share screen down, and there we go. We do have a couple of questions coming in. And I have a couple of questions myself, but we'll start with the ones I think everyone should be able to see these. So a great question from Catherine about talent, voice talent, the best way to approach animators, production houses about working with them outside of going through an agent.
I would say for voice talent, it would be valuable to email and reach out and introduce yourself to a lot of the independent studios, because they would be the people sourcing the voice talent. That said, animation is a lot of times, especially when it's it's for a client, we're kind of at the end. So, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't worked at a studio where we get to be the final deciding factor on the voice talent. Usually we work, at least for the commercial studios I've worked with, we work with an agency or direct to client, and they work with an audio house that chooses, and the client and the audio team selects the voice talent. But for independent animation or for internal projects, we will source our own talent. So it's absolutely valuable to just send out an email, say, hey, I'm here, this is what I do, here's some clips. It's really great to meet you. I'll check back in like 6 to 12 months. And yeah, animation takes a long time, so you really don't need to reach out more than that, because like if they are already in the process of a project, it's probably going to take another 6 to 9 months to make enough progress to maybe re-look at who the voice talent would be.
Yeah, and then Catherine also followed up saying maybe just for scratch tracks, you know, if that would be something that to offer.
Yeah, like you do it, yeah, for sure, because there's so much we can build off of a scratch track, and if there's an actor bringing some life to it, helps with the pacing of a thing and sort of the tone of the thing, and sort of guide us creatively from the get-go. Approaching independent studios might be the best way, because I know like with the shows that I've worked on, same situation, not commercial, but working with a studio, is that they're all SAG-AFTRA. I'm not totally familiar with the unions of that, but you know what I'm saying, like any actor that knows what I'm talking about, you know, and working through agencies and their reps and all that kind of stuff. But I think if it's something you're definitely interested in doing, exactly what Alicia said, is reaching out to the people that are, you know, there's independent live action filmmakers, there are independent animation filmmakers in town. Again, medium, not genre. And we're all lending our talents and skills to be storytellers. And I think encouraging that in the community as much as client work is what makes us better in both directions. doing client work and doing the way the system is sort of set up with agents and all that sort of thing, you sort of understand how this stuff gets done because it takes a lot of people. And then doing this independent work with collaboratively independent work, it's going to inform the kind of quality of the work you do for a client because you become better storytellers.
And then Clint had a question similarly about composers and sound designers getting hooked up with animation projects. You talk a little bit just in general about music and sound in animation, and would the suggestions be the same for that type of talent as it would for voice talent to connect?
There's yeah, it would be similar. And for all the, and I assume most people are local here, the Film Score Fest, run by Charlie McCarran, who's a local film composer.
Yay, Charlie.
So I would look into Film Score Fest, and Charlie knows that world, has spoke a lot about it here and at Catalyst Festival, which is something else we should put on that list of links and things of the stuff that's going on in Minnesota.
Yeah.
But as far as creatively, I love that part of the process. One, I've learned animation through music, the rhythm of timing through music. We know that bad music and bad audio can ruin any film, but good audio and good music is ignored because you feel it. So it's definitely, it's like the best people coming together to make something even better, to feel like it came out of one brain. It's one of my favorite parts of the process.
I have a couple of questions. I just wanted to get your thoughts on, as an outsider, kind of, it seems to me like 2021 could be the year of animation because of the pandemic. I'm thinking about certainly what the Blacklist, the NBC show, did. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and if you think animation is going to come to the rescue, basically, of the film and television industry. Yeah.
Oh. Who knows? That'd be. It is interesting that we're still carrying through, and you feel a little guilty that you're still working through the pandemic and all that and everything else that's going on. But I think it's certainly opened the door a little wider of because people are always going to have stories to tell, and there's always going to be a need for content and messaging, and so I think opening it up, like I was saying earlier, animation not being for kids. It's the power of it as a storytelling medium. And if we can fill that gap, we're of course going to love it and would be grateful to be in that position. But we're all still at home. But it's also very possible to do stuff remotely because we don't have to go on site to shoot. So I can have a team all over the world if I need to. And clear communication, those things that Alicia was talking about getting what you pay for, someone that can lead and communicate to a team, especially if we're remote and all over the planet. But I know from firsthand experience, it's very possible and you get some amazing results.
What did you think about the Blacklist, what they did with their season finale?
I am not familiar with it.
I am not either.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I should have talked to you about this. The Blacklist, NBC, drama series.
I know the show, just not the final.
Yeah, they were almost finished with shooting their what became their season finale when production shut down. And so what they did was change the story a bit and animated the episode. Go to NBC.com and take a look at it. It's I don't know how I feel about it. I haven't watched the entire thing, and it was weird. I have a couple of actor friends who are who were in the episode, and it's like, wow, you're animated, how cool.
Was it like Undone on Amazon? Was it like that show with sort of live action with animation over top of it?
No.
Oh,
Take a look. And again, I'll send out the link to everyone as well. Fraser just asked a really fantastic question about this having been a year of unforeseen challenges. And if NICE moves, or all of us as an industry, it could encourage the creation of animated content that reflect these events in our lives, in our society right now, but also contribute to the problem solving. I think you can see the question. I just want to echo that. I mean, I have said before that I think filmmakers, and I'll include animators in this specifically, are superheroes, powerful tools at your disposal for storytelling. And storytelling is a superpower. So, use your power for good. But I'd love to hear your take on that.
I have thoughts. Actually, can I answer part of the other question in terms of animation? But then it does still really tie in and relate to Fraser's question as well. So like in terms of where is animation gonna have its year or its moment or whatever in 2021, I kind of think we've already started to see it happening in the entertainment world, as far as like, can animation be considered something for adults? Can it tell adult stories? Can it tell really serious stories? And the answer is yes, because like if you look at what is it, Robot Love Chicken something. Netflix is like it was the assembled. I watched them, but like I can't remember. I'm terrible at names and like remembering.
Love, Death, and Robots.
Yes, Love, Death. I don't know why there were chickens in there. I don't know why my brain put chickens in there.
Robot
Chicken. Oh yeah, okay. But that is like a really good example of like a project that involved a lot of really serious stories and conversations and topics, but all told through animation. And I definitely feel like we've been seeing that happening. And now that there is this like gap where live action is having a little bit harder time telling stories, that I do think that animation is going to continue to play a larger and larger role, at least in the entertainment world, in more serious topics, that it's going to become something that is on par with live action in terms of like the kinds of stories it's able to tell. I also think that in terms of motion graphics, that moving graphics or animation for commercial purposes is going to be as ubiquitous, blah, blah, blah. The word I'm trying to say.
Now I can't say.
Yeah, I know. I said it wrong the first time. Now I can't say it right. But it's going to be so ever present, just like graphic design is now. So like pre-printing press, you didn't see as much graphic design. Post-printing press, graphic design everywhere. So in the future, we're going to be living in a Harry Potter world where everything moves, even if it's just a little bit. Like we're going to see billboards where someone's like, hey, blink, hey, blink, and then the words change and new words come up and they slide out and a new image slides in or whatever. Like we're going to see more and more of that as like technology builds on top of itself. Our websites are going to move a lot more. Like animation is in everything. It's really only a limitation of the technologies that we have right now. That's the only reason we're not doing it on everything right now. But I think 2021, it might just be like all of the 20s where like animation just becomes this ever-present thing where we're not even really thinking of it as an evolution. We're just going to simply forget that we didn't have it before. And then in terms of, Fraser's question, which is, would you mind restating his question too? I want to make sure I don't miss anything.
About could Nice Moves or the animation community encourage the creation of animated content that not only reflect the events of this year, but also contribute to the problem solving, be used for training, community building. So, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, I think, can I just refer to Karen Colliver's statement too? Because it's the idea of like, now's the time to do something. And I think it is not just telling the stories, but it's creating new structures where the storytellers are, where now the conversation or part of the conversation, and how you set up, to learn how to, you have paid training on an actual production that is getting a message out that's that the world needs to hear, but in the same token, it's employing people and building new community to have, as I said, everyone is the media now, like that thing of media is separate from us. We can tell those stories and change the way, like the thing that, we're guilty of not having diversity in our community. So of animators, that can happen by how we change education, training, commerce, all that stuff. Like, I feel like we're in a position to help define that.
I think creating videos or considering, like, if your medium is video, like that's your artistic medium, and you're wondering, should I use my artistic medium or my skills to fight against racism? The answer is absolutely yes. That said, you should learn and educate yourself, and just the simple process, even if you don't even, like, I would say yes 100%. And if you get tired and you're not sure, or you feel like the video is not good and you want to give up, that's okay too. In that, like, the value of how all the research you need to do in order to create a video is going to be like so valuable, so that any conversations you have with everyday people, like in the future, you're going to be more equipped to have those conversations because you took the time to make a video, or to start making a video, or to research everything you need in order to make that video. People, if you're not a person of color and you're trying to make a video about people of color, you could risk being like tone deaf. So in those situations, like if you're going to be talking about people of color and trying to share their experience, then you need to be having those conversations with those people. But if you're a person who, like, let's say, you can recognize your own ignorance, or you can recognize mistakes that in yourself that you made in the past, and that now you understand those things more fully because you've learned along the way. It's almost like if we're building a school of life together, right? And you're working on a course, understanding, are you building 101? And you're just like white person talking to another white person? Are you building 102? Okay, you're an ally now. What does that mean? What is the deeper history that you should know? Because like 101 is just like why you shouldn't respond all lives matter when someone says Black Lives Matter, right? Like why you should like kind of hold back your opinions so that you can hear the opinions of the people that it affects, and so that you can listen to their stories. That's all the 101 stuff. The 102 stuff is like the next level. Like, what's the history? Learning the history we didn't learn in school because we're a part of this society and this system, which is inherently racist. And then like there's the stuff beyond that. So like when you're making your video, I guess I would say like consider who you're making it for, and what perspective you're making it from, and like what what class level is it at? Is it for people who are just now realizing that racism still exists? Is it for people who have understood but haven't really like known where to look? Or is it for people who have been fighting this fight for a long time and now they need more definitive hardcore action steps? Thinking about that's going to help you like a ton. And even if you like get overwhelmed and you're like, oh, I can't do this, that's okay too, because you just, the effort of learning and like all the information you're going to be carrying with you is so valuable as well.
Thank you. We've crossed the hour mark, and so I want to wrap it up, but I do want to bring it back down to kind of the local market with one last question from Jordan about applying for jobs and what the market is like right now. Has there been a slowdown in the job market related to animation, or an increase, or what's going on in the local market?
We adjusted, I think, but it's always been hard, right, Alicia? Like,
Yeah.
It's a different, like the LA model of project to project jumping versus having a job for 10 years mentality. And I don't know if that's Midwest thing or whatever, but I'm not from here originally, but I've lived here long enough. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It is tough. It's tough under normal circumstances. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it, is like how things operated pre-quarantine and how things are going to operate in the future. It's hard for us to make predictions about what it's going to be like in the future. I started in the animation industry at Fisher Edit a year before the recession, before 2008. I started in 2007. And there's no other way to say it other than there was definitely money, and it was definitely being thrown around a little carelessly, I would say, but like, that's my perspective. I also come from like a really low socioeconomic background, so what I would consider a lot of money is not what other people would consider a lot of money. But it seemed like there was a lot of money, and it was just being like, yeah, like, here's the money. But that went away like fast, like not like that, but more like it took a year for it to just go down and down and down and down and down. And then it didn't really come back up. And that, I think, changed a lot of things in terms of like how much employers could pay their employees because their clients were paying them less for the same work. Also the amount of animators, the amount, like all the tools used to be so expensive that there was this giant barrier to entry. So there was literally less people competing for the same jobs. But today, I mean, everybody is a creator, you know, like you go on YouTube and they know how to animate, and they technically are professionals, you know, like if you get paid to do it, you're a professional. It doesn't matter how you go about earning that money. But if we're talking about like the traditional path and the traditional studio setup and the traditional employment kind of process, I would say that a lot of the studios around town have somewhere between like 4 to like 10, maybe 15 at a maximum employees at any given time. And the turnover is not huge. So it is hard to get a full-time position in Minneapolis with slightly or with above average or below skills, if that makes sense. Like above average, like you have above average skills, you're still gonna have a little bit of a tough, or not even a little bit, you're gonna have a tough time, especially if the skills that you have honed to become above average are not as in demand as other skills. And in those situations, it's like we live in a remote world. Quarantine, the reason that we can't talk about like how quarantine is going to change this is because this was like the giant wake up call we needed to say, hey, animation can happen. Like the tools have become so affordable, and our internet and everything has become so connected that we don't actually all need to be in the same office. And to anyone who's freelancing, who's been trying to find a full-time job, or who wants to freelance and has been enjoying their time freelancing, I would say like start looking at companies outside of Minnesota, because like the tech companies have already been like recognizing during this quarantine that not all of their employees need to live in the most expensive location, and that they can actually offer a better quality of life to their employees by allowing them to work in different states. And those people are taking the incentives and they are going to the places with like lower lower cost of living. And it's probably only going to take months before the entire animation industry recognizes this and starts doing it too. So I would say like this is an opportunity. Get your portfolio ready. If you're tired, I get it. It sucks. It's like really hard and stressy time. But like this is also like an opportunity because the world is like changing. The lights have gone off. They're about to turn back on, and you should probably try to be ready. And yeah, start hunting down like the studios that look for studios whose work looks like the work that you want to be doing, and start making your portfolio look like their portfolio, and get ready to start reaching out to them. Like you don't have to do it today, but like start reaching out to them. And then, you know, like don't be like crazy annoying and emailing every month, but like definitely be like mid-level annoying and email them every 6 months.
Great. Thank you. That's a
Yeah.
great place to stop. I think I want
Sorry.
to, no, thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Mike. This has been a great conversation. So interesting, so helpful. Remember everyone, we will be sending out an email with a bunch of links of things that Mike and Alicia talked about. And we will have a recording up on our YouTube page in the next couple of days, sometime next week, let's say. Future First Friday Toolkit series events are being scheduled. Please give us feedback if there are things that you would like us to cover. We do have a plan for August to focus on labor laws, the difference between independent contractors and employees, and wage theft. That should be a really exciting thing. We are probably going to take July off because First Friday falls on July 3rd. It's a Friday before a holiday weekend. And for me, the 3rd is a huge national holiday because Disney Plus is dropping Hamilton that day. So I will not be talking to anyone. So again, thank you. And sorry I couldn't share cookies with you all, but thank you for your hard work, and
Thank you.
we'll see you
Thank you.
soon.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.